Hello everyone, I am Dr. Stuti Narula Markan, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this deeply relevant and intellectually demanding discussion titled From Earthbound Morality to Cosmic Responsibility, as the first part of space ethics and dispute mechanisms governing human conduct in outer space exploration. This lecture seeks to transcend the conventional boundaries of legal discourse and invites you to engage with one of the most profound questions of our time. That is, how do we ethically and legally govern human conduct in outer space? As aspiring legal professionals, you will soon take on roles that place you at the forefront of shaping the normative frameworks that guide our societies. Most of your training has so far focused on terrestrial laws, rules, and systems that have evolved over centuries to manage human relations, commerce, sovereignty, and justice with the finite boundaries of our planet. However, the world is changing rapidly. Space, once the exclusive domains of astronomers, physicists, and engineers, is now emerging as a dynamic, contested legal arena. As humanity's reach extends into outer space, the call for the parallel expansion in our legal and ethical reasoning becomes urgent and inevitable. The evolution of space exploration is no longer merely a scientific or technological triumph. It has become a social, political, economic, legal, and ethical issue. Space is not just a vacuum filled with stars and celestial bodies. It is increasingly a theater of human activity, a domain where satellites navigate, data is transmitted, nations assert soft and hard power, corporations seek profits, and human aspirations take flight. This transformation demands a sophisticated understanding of both legal regimes and ethical principles that extend beyond Earth. In this lecture, we shall navigate through the historical origins and philosophical underpinnings of space ethics, examine existing international and national legal frameworks, assess ethical dilemmas in current space practices, and critically analyze dispute resolution mechanisms available for outer space conflicts. We shall then turn our gaze towards the future, contemplating how legal systems and ethical thought must evolve to meet the complexities of interplanetary life, artificial intelligence in space, and responsibilities we bear as stewards of the universe. To begin, let us ground ourselves in the meaning and significance of the term space ethics. Space ethics can be defined as the study of moral principles that should guide human behavior in the context of outer space. While this may sound abstract or futuristic, the ethical dimensions of space activities are already pressing. With private companies planning lunar missions, asteroid mining, and Martian colonization, we are confronted with the questions of ownership, sustainability, inclusivity, and justice that have not been resolved. The traditional structures of international law, while with noble intent, often fall short in providing clear and enforceable answers to these emerging dilemmas. Carl Sagan, one of the most revered voices in the science, once reflected that the Earth is a very small stage in the vast cosmic arena. His words, poetic and cautionary, encapsulate the urgency with which we must re-express our sense of responsibility, not just to our planet and its people, but to cosmos itself. What we choose to do in space, how we explore it, how we exploit it, how we govern it will shape our identity as species and will echo across generations to come. Consider a hypothetical scenario. A private enterprise operating under the jurisdiction of a powerful nation manages to extract precious metals from an asteroid valued at several $billions. The immediate legal question arises: who owns that wealth? Is it the company that took the initiative and bore the risk? Or is it the nation state under whose flag the company operates? Or does the wealth, by the virtue of coming from outer space, belong to all of the humanity? Further, what are the consequences of removing a mass from a celestial body? Could it alter the gravitational dynamics of that system, creating unforeseeable consequences for the nearby objects or missions? These are no longer abstract speculations. They are real, tangible questions arising in the wake of legal, leonarchy and ethical uncertainties. And such dilemmas are not limited to resource extraction. They extend to questions of contamination, colonialization, environment degradation, privacy in space-based surveillance, militarization, human rights in extraterrestrial settlements, and even the moral statutes of non-human entities such as autonomous artificial intelligences. Why should ethics matter in space? One might ask, especially when our old planet is fraught with unresolved injustice. The answer lies in the cumulative effect of our decisions. If we do not apply ethical reasoning at this foundational stage of space civilization, we risk replicating, if not exacerbating, the historical injustices that have been plagued in human history: colonialism, exploitation, environmental destruction, economic inequality, and armed conflict. Let us recall the historical parallel of colonialization on Earth. The age of exploration brought with it immense technological achievements and wealth creation, but also led to dispossession and marginalization of entire populations, the dissemination of ecosystems, and institutionalization of racial hierarchies. If we approach the outer space with the same extractive and competitive mentality, we may recreate these patterns on a cosmic scale, this time with no marginalized population to protest and no higher authority to intervene. Hence, the need for the robust ethical compass is not optional, it is imperative. A foundational ethical question concerns whether outer space should be treated as a common, an entity beyond appropriation, or as a resource to be divided and exploited. The former approach promotes shared stewardship and mutual accountability. The latter encourages commodification and competition. Both positions have legal and philosophical implications, and each presents its own ethical challenges. From an environmental perspective, the notion of planetary protection becomes a central theme. Every mission that involves sending spacecraft to another planet, be it robotic or manned, carries the risk of contaminating the planet with terrestrial microbes. This poses a significant threat to the integrity of future scientific investigations. More importantly, it raises an ethical question. Do we have the right to alter pristine planetary environments for our curiosity or gain? Should we, in the name of science or commerce disturb the natural state of celestial bodies that may hold the secrets of life's origin? In contrast, some ethicists argue that humanity has a moral obligation to expand into space, especially in the light of existential threats such as climate change, pandemics, and nuclear war. This school of thought, often associated with cosmic survivalism, believes that ensuring human continuity necessitates space colonialization. Yet, even if one accepts this premise, the method and manner of such expansion must be guided by the principles of equity, justice, and sustainability. We must not become celestial conquerors, but rather cosmic custodians. The very act of naming, claiming, and altering space environments demands ethical reflection. When companies like SpaceX name their proposed Mars colonies or lunar stations, that are they exercising benign imagination, or are they laying symbolic claims of ownership? When national agencies plant flags on the moon, do these acts constitute harmless ceremony, or do they challenge the spirit of international treaties that declare space to be beyond national appropriation? Moreover, the ethical dimensions of space are not confined to interplanetary domains. Even Earth's orbit, particularly low Earth orbit, is becoming a contested and congested zone. It's congested zone with over 30,000 pieces of trackable space debris and countless more untraceable fragments. We are on the brink of Kessler syndrome, scenario where cascading collisions could render orbit usable for generations. This represents not just a technical risk, but ethical failure, the inability to preserve a vital common current future generations. Equally important is the question of access. Space activities remain concentrated among a handful of nations and private actors with significant technological and financial resources. This raises issue of inclusivity and global equity. Should space be an elite playground, or should there be mechanisms to ensure that all of the humanity can benefit from its exploration? The principle of space for all, echoed in the Outer Space Treaty, remains aspirational unless concretely implemented through fair access to data, participation in governance, and equitable distributions of benefit. It is evident that then the space ethics must be integrative, encompassing not only environmental and distributive concerns, but also procedural and structural justice. How decisions are made? Who gets to sit at all the tables? How transparency is ensured? And how accountability is maintained are such important as the substantive outcomes of those decisions. This invites a pluralistic ethical framework, one that can accommodate diverse philosophical traditions, cultural values, and geopolitical interest. To conclude this opening segment, the imperative of space ethics is neither hypothetical nor distant. It is here, it is now, it is urgent. The laws we write and the ethical frameworks we construct today will not merely guide rockets and satellites. They will shape the future of civilization itself. As legal scholars and professionals in training, you have a pivotal role to play in the cosmic dialogue. You are not just students of law, or you are the potential architects of legal order that may one day extend beyond our atmosphere, encompassing not just nations and corporations, but possibly entire world. In the next segment of this lecture, we shall delve into the historical philosophical foundations of space ethics, tracing the intellectual lineage that informs our current understanding and exploring how ancient wisdom and modern legal norms converge to guide our journey from Earth to stars. To truly grasp the moral and legal obligations that guide humanity's engagement with outer space, we must begin in this part by understanding the intellectual and philosophical heritage upon which these principles are built. The ethical conduct of humans in unfamiliar or ungoverned domains is not a new problem. It has emerged time and again in human history, whether during the maritime exploration, colonial expansion, or the advent of nuclear age. These moments in history were met with corresponding ethical reflection, legal regulation, and philosophical debate. Similarly, the emerging domain of outer space must now be subjected to equally rigorous scrutiny. Space ethics is not a product of single intellectual tradition. Rather, it is an interdisciplinary field formed by ancient moral philosophies, moral legal doctrines, environmental consciousness, and even theological and cosmological worldviews. Let us consider beginning by how various ethical systems, both Western and non-Western, can inform our approach to space. One of the foundational pillars of Western moral philosophy, Immanuel Kant, the person with ethics, offers a profound starting point. Kant argues that moral actions are those performed out of sense of duty and guided by universal maxims, rather than by consequences alone. His famous principle of treating individuals as ends in themselves and never merely as means to end becomes especially significant in space exploration. For instance, when we design a long-duration space mission involving astronauts or perhaps one day colonists or genetically modified humans, Kantian ethics demand that we uphold their dignity, autonomy, and rights, not reduce them to instruments of national pride or scientific data collection. Kant's notion of the kingdom of ends, a community where all rational begins, legislate moral law in harmony, finds a conceptual echo in the vision of space. Kant's notion of the kingdom of ends, a community where all the rational begins, legislate moral law in harmony, finds a conceptual echo in the vision of space as the common heritage of mankind. It calls upon us to imagine a cosmic community where the rights of all the entities, human, artificial, or even microbial, are considered in the moral deliberation. This kind of reasoning becomes indispensable when considering the ethical status of potential alien life or the rights and responsibilities of autonomous artificial intelligence systems managing space habitats. Parallel to this, when we find important insights in the utilitarian thought, especially in the work of Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Utilitarianism emphasizes outcomes, the greatest happiness for the greatest number. In space ethics, this line of reasoning could support initiatives that maximize scientific discovery, enable planetary defense, or ensure survival of humanity through colonialization. However, utilitarianism also presents certain risk when applied in isolation. For instance, if the long-term benefit of mining a celestial body for Earth's energy needs is deemed to outweigh the immediate environmental cost to that celestial body, does that justify the act? A purely utilitarian calculus might say yes, but should it? This is where we cross the fertilization with other ethical frameworks becomes necessary. Environmental ethics, a relatively recent branch of moral philosophy, offers essential correctives. The foundational idea here is the nature, where terrestrial or extraterrestrial possesses intrinsic value, not merely instrumental worth. Thinkers like Aldo Leopold and Arne Naes advanced ideas of deep ecology, promoting the view that all life forms have a right to exist, irrespective of their usefulness to humans. Extending such an ethic to outer space compels us to treat planets, moons, and even seemingly lifeless asteroids with moral regard. Such a shift demands not only legal protections but also a cultural transformation in how we view the cosmos, not as a storehouse of extractable wealth but as a sacred expanse deserving of humility and restraint. Further, indigenous philosophies from various parts of the world offer yet another lens through which we might view our cosmic responsibilities. Many indigenous traditions, such as those of Native American, Aboriginal, Australian, of African tribal cosmologies, view existence as interconnected, linking the human, non-human, spiritual and cosmic realms in a continuum of reciprocal relationships. These worldviews are not much but emphasize harmony, balance and stewardship. If incorporated into the architecture of space ethics, such perspectives could provide vital insights for developing non-exploitive, cooperative and holistic models of governance for space environments. It is also important to note that space ethics need not only be rooted in normative moral theory, it must also be anchored in historical consciousness. The legal regime governing outer space began not in the vacuum but in the crucible of Cold War geopolitics. The space age, officially inaugurated with the launch of Sputnik 1 by Soviet Union in 1957, was as much about political rivalry and national prestige as it was about scientific advancements. The first human ventures into orbit were not driven solely by curiosity but by the race to assert dominance in a new strategic frontier. This context led to the creation of the foundational legal instrument in space law, the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, formally titled the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies. The OST is the remarkably forward-thinking document. It enshrines the idea that outer space is the province of all mankind and prohibits national appropriation, militarization, and the deployment of weapons of mass destruction in orbit. It places responsibility on states for both governmental and non-governmental space activities and requires that such activities be conducted in the interest of all countries. At a time when the world was bitterly divided among ideological lines, the OST stood as a rare example of consensus on a shared moral and legal principle that space should not become another domain of conflict or conquest. The collectivist vision, through idealistic, was grounded in the pragmatic recognition that humanity cannot afford to repeat the colonial mistakes of Earth in the heavens above. However, the OST, like all other treaties, is a product of its time. It contains ambiguities and omissions that reflect the technological limitations and geopolitical realities for the 1960s. For instance, while it prohibits national appropriation, it does not clearly address the rights of private corporations, nor does it specify what constitutes peaceful use. As space activities have evolved to include private actors, commercial interest, and complex technological systems, these gaps have become increasingly problematic. Following the OST, a series of supplementary agreements were developed, including the Rescue Agreement 1968, the Liability Convention 1972, and the Registration Convention 1976. Each of these deals with specific aspects of space activity, such as rescuing astronauts in distress, liability for damage caused by space objects, and mandatory registration of launched objects. Yet, these agreements do suffer from weak enforcement mechanisms, ambiguous language, and inconsistent ratification among spacefaring nations. Among these, the 1979 Moon Agreement stands out for its attempt to address resource exploitation directly. It declares that the Moon and its resources are the common heritage of mankind and calls for the intentional regime to govern their extraction. Unfortunately, the Moon Agreement has been ratified by only a handful of countries, with most major spacefaring nations, including the United States, Russia, and China, refusing to sign. This rejection illustrates the tension between ethical aspirations of collective stewardship and the political economic motivations of powerful states. The failure of the Moon Agreement to gain wide acceptance points to a fundamental challenge in space ethics: the divergence between ethical, universals, and national interests. While many countries pay theoretical homage to space as a global common, their legislative and policy actions often prioritize national competitiveness and commercial advantage. This dichotomy is perhaps most evident in the recent trends of national space legislation. Countries like the United States, Luxembourg, and the United Arab Emirates have passed laws granting domestic companies the right to own the profit from resources extracted in space. These laws, while applauded by the private sector, raise serious concerns regarding their compatibility with the international treaties and the ethical implications of privatizing what is supposed to be in a shared domain. Let us not forget that legal systems do not operate in moral vacuums. They are reflections of ethical, cultural, and political milieu from which they arise. As such, the codification of space law must be informed by diverse ethical frameworks that honor both historical context and future potential. This includes drawing from religious philosophies as well. For example, the concept of cosmic stewardship appears in various religious texts, be it the Christian idea of dominion with responsibility, the Islamic view of humanity as Khalifa, or stewards of the earth, or Hindu principle of dharma, which emphasizes the duty and righteousness in all the realms of life, including the natural world. What emerges from this survey is a mosaic of ethical traditions, each offering valuable guidance for constructing a moral framework suited to the challenges of space. The goal is not just to privilege one of the systems over another, but create an inclusive ethical discourse that draws from the collective wisdom of humanity. In summary, space ethics must be seen as both a continuation and transformation of terrestrial ethics. It continues the human endeavor to act justly, think responsibly, and govern wisely. But it also transforms these efforts by extending them into a new domain, one that is physically remote, legally unsettled, and morally complex. As we journey from earthbound morality to cosmic responsibility, we carry with us the legacies of Kant and Mill, the visions of Sagan and Leopold, the traditions of indigenous wisdom and cautionary tales of history. The challenge lies in synthesizing these legacies into a coherent framework capable of guiding humanity's next great adventure. In the following section, we shall examine how the existing legal frameworks attempt to regulate space activity and where they succeed or fall in addressing the ethical concerns discussed so far. This will include an analysis of key international treaties, national space laws, and soft law instruments that form the current scaffolding of space governance. Till then, we'll meet you in the next segment. Thank you very much.